when it comes to salt, as we talked in our previous episode, our bodies are saline solution in motion. Our tears are salt, our sweat is salt, our urine is salt, and primarily that salt is sodium and chloride. But potassium and magnesium and calcium, these other complex chlorides, are really essential for life as well. So years ago, we talked in the previous portion of this about making your own electrolyte drink with just taking a quart of clean water and adding a quarter teaspoon of real salt to it. And you could use Celtic if that's your favorite. I use real salt. And it's a great electrolyte replacement drink.
SupersetYourLife.com podcast. This is still your weekly dose of entertainment, education, and inspiration to fuel your life inside and beyond the gym. This is actually part 2 of the interview with Darryl Bosshardt. So if you have not listened to episode 102 of our show, that was part 1. That's going to give you his entire background, the differences between chemically processed salts and real salts. And that's what we call Salt 101. So that'd be a really good place to start if you haven't listened to that one yet. Otherwise, if you just wanted to jump into this one too, you're going to find the topics that Darryl and I discussed this time to be very, very entertaining and very unique. I think you're really going to get a kick, and you're really just going to I think you're really going to like what we're talking about in this episode. So I'm not going to spoil it. I'm just going to get right into it. But a quick rundown on his biography is that he is passionate about healthy living, healthy eating, and long-term and lifelong learning. Darryl grew up working for the family mineral business in Redmond, Utah, and earned a Bachelor of Science degree at Southern Utah University, followed by an MBA at Western Governors University. So that is Mr. Darryl in a nutshell. Very, very good friend of mine now, and just super blessed to have him on the podcast. Now for round 2. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Darryl Bosshardt.
Replacement drink. And so whether you're a UPS driver and you're sweating, or you're a power lifter, or you're a gardener, or you're just playing soccer with the kids down at the park, our bodies are losing salt every day, and that salt is essential for every cleansing function of the body, and it's just so essential. Yeah. And so rather than going into a processed sports drink that you've got, yellow number whatever, and that's blue and hot pink, that's got tons of sugar in it, that's why we have Relight. We launched it as a re-electrolyte. And for a guy that doesn't want to make their own, or you're busy, I'm an avid mountain biker, and when I'm on the trail, it's just so nice to be able to put a scoop of Relight in my water bottle. And in addition to the sodium chloride, as you can see on the label, we've gone out of our way to add potassium and magnesium, which are 2 really important electrolytes that often are overlooked. Our early ancestors would have gotten more magnesium and potassium in their diets than we do today for a number of reasons. Mm-hmm. And so as a lifter particularly, you need high amounts of potassium. Yes. And you do get potassium in meats. Red meat, chicken, fish do have good amounts of potassium, magnesium, but often that alone may not be enough, especially if you're really, lifting hard. And so that's why we've added potassium and some magnesium, to the electrolyte formula we call Relight.
Right. Where is the potassium sourced, of curiosity?
How that
process works.
Potassium citrate, I think, we've changed the formula a couple of times. What does it say on the jar you have there?
How are you asking how much is in it?
No, the form, potassium citrate, or
potassium citrate, yes.
Yeah. And so we just sourced that from our supplier. So I couldn't tell you exactly what that source is.
What's the difference between potassium citrate and I guess another type of potassium? Because I've used a ton of electrolyte supplements, right? And one will say it's this type of potassium, one will say it's that type of potassium. I'm like, I didn't know there was that many different kinds.
Yeah, and I think we're still learning a lot. There's, if you jump online, you can find people who love, potassium chloride versus potassium citrate. We chose citrate, working with some of our partners like yourself. Talking to Dr. David Brown or Dr. James Dean Antonio and some of the other influencers we use in that space to say, what is your favorite form? Now, as we looked at the elemental analysis online during the last episode, real salt itself has some trace amounts of potassium in it, but it's not a dietary source of potassium. Largely the sodium or the potassium in real salt that's there would be in the form of potassium chloride, because it is a sodium and chloride complex chloride base. And so in talking to our partners, they were the ones who recommended potassium citrate, and so that's why we chose that one. But I'm not a food scientist, so I don't have a lot of the specifics on all the different forms and bioavailabilities of the different magnesium and potassium forms that are out there.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to compliment you guys on this product too. I think this is the best tasting stevia sweetened supplement that I've ever had. Normally stevia has a real weird kind of like metallic gross aftertaste. There's no sucralose in this, which is another one of my favorite things about this, because I've dealt with stomach ulcers in the past. Couple toddlers, a couple businesses. We our family takes on a lot. That's why my emotional support puppy goes with me everywhere. But I think that part of my doctor was saying that part of the problem was the amount of sucralose I'm consuming, which because I'm taking creatine, I'm taking a whole bunch of bodybuilding supplements too. And it's just the most common artificial sweetener. And I do like artificial sweeteners, I'm not gonna lie. But to be able to drink, 3 or 4 scoops of Relight throughout the day, I've noticed a difference. My gut is feeling much better.
Yeah, and I think that's just the quality of the stevia that we have sourced. Because I agree, I'm not a fan of stevia typically. I mean, I like that it's low glycemic, but I don't like that bitter, that stevia bite that
yeah,
it just tastes a little chemically to me, and I don't notice that in Relight. And there are people that are a little bit stevia sensitive. Sometimes a headache is a symptom. Sometimes if you've never taken a stevia supplement and you take it, you might get a headache. And for whatever reason, there's some people that get a little bit of a headache from stevia. And so we do actually have an unsweetened version that has no stevia in it, and so unflavored, unsweetened. And so if that's you, it's kind of boring.
Yeah.
And I feel bad for you because our flavors are really good.
All the flavors. I'm holding pina colada in my hand right now. That's definitely my favorite of your guys' Relights. And as far as the pre-workout go, man, both of them are good, but the blueberry lemonade is bomb.
And really good. I know most of the time you're extremely carnivore, but one of my favorite uses for Relight is actually an apple slice. I like apples, and so I'll take an apple and I'll dip it in, just like I dip it in salsa, but I'll dip the apple in Relight, and it
what
is
flavor?
Strawberry lemonade is my go-to.
That sounds good. The mango would be good too.
Yeah, but if your kids eat apples, or it's a great way to add additional salt to your diet by dipping and you can, I've never tried it on a steak. We talked earlier about putting a Florida Cell or a kosher salt on a steak, and I've never tried to put Relight on one, but that might be interesting.
You know what? We're doing pork tonight. We might try a little bit of the mango with the pork. That might, and like a little bit of cinnamon and some rosemary. That might.
You'll have to keep us posted.
I'll let you know how it goes. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I got to try it because you're curious and I'm curious now, and so we're gonna see if that's good.
I'm a big fan of sushi. Next time I go to a sushi place, I'm gonna bring some Relight and add a little extra flavor.
Yeah.
A wasabi mango tuna.
I love it. Last question on your Relight supplement is coconut water powder. Now that's something that Hydra EAA, it's a metabolic nutrition supplement that I use religiously right before fasted cardio. It's an essential amino acid, EAA. Very, very good blend. That's also an ingredient that's in that product as well. And it's, from what I understand, very good for your gut. And so that's been helping with my stomach ulcers too, I think.
And coconut water powder coconut water is known as a great electrolyte. You can buy coconut water, that they sell it as an electrolyte. If you go to the grocery store, you can buy, coconut water because it has potassium, magnesium in it. And so they take that and then dehydrate it. And so that's why we added theirs for that, kind of that complex electrolyte as well.
Yeah. Good stuff. Okay. Awesome. Question on fine sea salt versus kosher sea salt. We were talking before we started recording about how much misconception there is around kosher salt and what is it? Is it just the way that it's, I mean, I know, but is it for our listeners, is it just the way that it's cut and that's it? That's the end. That's literally all kosher means, or is there more to it?
I love that question because it's one of the most misunderstood parts of salt is the size. And so when you look at the real salt offerings, and I know you crossed your counter there, you've got a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I got everything right here in front of me.
But you'd start with something like this. We'd call this extra coarse, or like those crystals that you had, there in that bag that you showed at the start of the first show. And with that larger salt crystal, it's, I think in that bag you've got some that are probably about the size of a golf ball. The bag that, yes, that one. And so those, you actually could take that salt crystal in a microplane that you might grind a spice like a nutmeg or something, and you actually can grind those salt crystals and make your own salt.
Right.
And there's salt grinders, like you have a pepper grinder, and a pepper grinder, when you grind pepper, it actually makes sense because you're cracking that fresh, and so it's not as stale as. But when you grind salt, there's no magic like there is in pepper. And so the difference when it comes to size of salt, whether that's the coarse, which is the large you might put in a grinder, the kosher, which is the red lid that you have in your hand, the size of a salt crystal that you might use on a prime rib, or you might see on a margarita rimmer, that size of crystal is a little bit larger. It's a little bit more flaky. If you ate a pretzel, I don't recommend it, but if you did, that size of salt on a pretzel is known as that kosher size crystal. Mm-hmm. Then you have the fine size, which is more that you'd use every day on your kitchen table. And then you have a powder size. I don't know if we sent you any of the powder. It's about the size, the powder, it looks like flour. It's like confectioner sugar. It's just a very
I wanted to add that to our last PO so bad, just out of curiosity. But it's like, all right, we've got this PO, that PO, and that PO. Let's start with the essentials first.
but the difference is really how it reacts to the tongue and the surface area. So we talked in the previous episode how salt is hygroscopic, so it absorbs moisture.
Yeah.
And so particularly when we talk about kosher, there's two meanings of the word kosher. If you were involved in Judaism, part of the Jewish community, they have a law of health. And this law of health says you can't eat things that certain things are not kosher, not clean or approved for the Jewish community. One of those things that's not kosher is blood. So if you're gonna eat an animal, you've got to bleed it out in a certain way. And if you're going to eat a steak, you can't eat the steak if there's blood in it, because blood in Judaism isn't kosher.
Yeah.
And because salt is
I think that's all in Leviticus, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, you're right. And because salt is hygroscopic, if you take a salt crystal that looks like that kosher crystal, and you cake that on a steak, because the salt is hygroscopic, it will suck the blood out of that steak. And because it's a larger flake, you can brush it off without making the meat overly salty.
Wow. Now it all makes sense, because this whole time I've been like, okay, there's kosher certified this, kosher certified that. What does it mean? And then I'm like, okay, but the actual definition of kosher is literally just the cut of the salt, and that's it. Like, you can have kosher sea salt, you could have kosher any kind of salt.
Exactly, and that kosher sized crystal is known as, if you're going to kosher something, if you're going to make that meat kosher, you're going to kosher it. So you're going to use kosher sized salt to kosher that piece of meat, mean you're going to suck the blood out of it to make it approved for the Jewish community. So that size of crystal is known as koshering salt. So, and because of the way that interacts, if you were to take a piece of steak and you were to put the kosher crystals on it, you will see in a short period of time little pools of moisture around those salt crystals as that salt is sucking the moisture out. If you put the salt that kosher size salt on a tomato, you'll see the same thing. It's going to like slice a tomato and you put the salt crystals on there and it'll suck that juice up out of the tomato.
Yeah.
And so if you're doing a prime rib, if you cover that prime rib in a heavy amount of kosher salt, you'll get a drier rind on the outside of the prime rib because that salt's going to suck the juice out of that edge. And so that's why that size is known as koshering salt. Now, if you looked at the blue lid, which is fine,
Mhm.
if you look on the back of that blue lid, you're going to see a little. If you look at the nutritional panel and then look just to the side of it, you'll see a bunch of little symbols. It says paleo friendly, gluten free.
Yep.
Then there's a little U with a circle around it.
Yep, I see that.
That means that if you're Jewish, so the Orthodox Union, that's that symbol. So this salt is kosher certified, but it's fine sized. So for people wonder if kosher certified means that a rabbi comes and gives a blessing or something. That's not the case at all. What happens is once a year, a member of the Jewish community will come and look at our facility like a health inspector. And he will look at it and say, okay, is there any unclean animals in the facility? Cloven animals, right? Because they're in the Bible, they're unclean. And so they will look at the facility to make sure that we are washing our hands, that we're following food safety protocols, and there's nothing in the facility that would be deemed unclean for the Jewish community. And so when he walks out of the, he walks in, looks around, walks out, and he says, okay, this is approved for the Jewish community. So if you were strict Jewish, you don't want to eat anything that's unclean or potentially contaminated. And so all of our salt is approved for somebody in the Jewish faith because we've had a member of the faith walk in and say, yep, you guys are washing your hands, you're cleaning your equipment, and there's nothing in here that's unclean. And that's what that Orthodox Union means. So anytime you see a food that's kosher approved, it means it's just they've done a good job keeping it safe and it's approved for the Jewish community. Now, if a chef on TV says, hey, grab your kosher salt, unless that chef unless you're watching Jewish cooking television, that chef is meaning grab a larger salt crystal because it's going to interact as a food scientist differently on the surface of that prime rib.
Yeah.
And then if we move one stage smaller to the fine salt, it's the same exact process. It's ground a little bit finer particle. And then the next stage down would be the powder salt. And powder would be used as something topical. So if you were to say,
good. I'm glad we're getting into the powder because that was my next question. I was like, when would it be used for? Kind of like what's on popcorn, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's only the top. Remember when we talked about the beauty of the fleur de sel, how it interacts really lightly with the tongue. And so you put it on your steak and you ate this essentially raw piece of meat with this light snowflake salt crystal on the top of it and how it almost tasted like candy. The smaller the salt crystal, the more surface area is exposed to the tongue when it's consumed. So if you were to put a coarse salt crystal like this one here that about the size of a peppercorn, if you were to put this salt crystal in your mouth, when you suck on that, you're only actually sucking on the outside edge of that salt crystal. And you're not touching, your tongue doesn't touch the inside of the salt crystal because it's inside the salt crystal.
Yeah.
Well, if you were to pulverize that into a powder, into dust, and then put that same amount of salt crystal on your tongue,
it's going to taste night and day different.
It's going to be extremely salty because now all that surface area is touching the tongue all at once. And so if you were to take that steak example again, and you were to cake that steak in powder salt, and then you were to eat that, it would be extremely salty.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why you use that kosher flake, because you can put it on top, and not only does it give it a nice little crunch if you don't brush it off, but you also can brush it off, and the meat isn't overly saturated with salt. Where if you did the same thing with a fine salt, you would have it in the crevices of that steak, and that steak would be extremely salty if it were fine salt versus the kosher. So in in the size, we're only talking about how it interacts differently on the tongue. And if you were to take, though, that Florida cell that we talked about earlier, and you put it in a soup, the magic's gone. If you take the powder salt, put it into a soup, the magic's gone because it dissolves immediately. But topically, if you were to use, let's say you were to make some salted pine nuts or something, you don't want to use a coarse crystal, because that coarse crystal on a pine nut, it's going to just fall right off. But if you could dust that pine nut with the powder salt, it will adhere to it really well, and it's going to be much more flavorful than a larger crystal. Does that kind of make sense?
It does make a lot of sense. Yeah. So you guys have so we have fine cut, kosher cut, coarse cut, powder, and I see that you have smoked salts, and I heard you talking about that on the last interview. I can't remember the gentleman's name that interviewed you, but he was like, one of the complaints that he gets, because he's a reseller of yours too, and he goes, one of the complaints that I get is the salt is too smoky. And I'm like, oh, I need some of that.
Some people love the flavor of smoke, and especially carnivore diet, smoked meats, preserving meats. That's what our ancestors, if you didn't have salt, you smoked the meat to preserve it.
Yeah, 90% of all the meat that we eat, which is because we're carnivores, 90% of all the meat that we eat, we smoke it. And so I'm thinking this is gonna have to go on our next purchase order.
And it is so good. A lot of companies today, that they'll, because they want that smoked flavor, or their customers do, they'll use a shortcut and use like liquid smoke or something like that. That's more of a flavoring versus, salt. It's hygroscopic, and so it absorbs water out of the air. And so if you have a really humid smoke, those salt crystals absorb that flavor really well. And so, yeah, I can see if smoked flavor wasn't your thing and you tried our smoked salt, you're going to say, oh, that tastes like smoked salt, which is what it's supposed to taste like.
Exactly. Okay. So when it comes to tasting salt, like, we're putting health aside right now. We're just looking at this like a connoisseur, right? Like we're gonna have some fun with this. Not that this hasn't been fun. This has been an absolute blast. I love nerding out about the science and everything. But when it comes to when it comes to appreciating the art of this of the salt, right? Taylor and I, we like our wine, we like our bourbons. Okay, we consume 1 or 2 drinks a week. We're not heavy drinkers by any stretch, but we love to kick back on a date night from time to time and just sip a little bit and enjoy it. Alcohol is not very friendly to the ketogenic diet. So when we taste wine, when we taste bourbon, we always start with with a clean palate, right? And so that could be eating anything that's just kind of bland and gives you a base to start from, or something familiar. I mean, like if it's wine, a piece of fatty steak, that's going to bring out a lot more of, like, with a good heavy Malbec or something, it's going to bring out a lot of those flavors that might otherwise kind of be hidden. So when it comes to salt, I mean, we're new to this, right? And so, like, we're like, oh yeah, no, this salt is great on this, that salt's great on that. I like the sweetness of Redmond salt. I like this about the Celtic sea salt. But again, we're pretty new to it. Is it like tasting bourbons and wines? Is it
not all that different?
Okay.
So the first thing I would say, if your kitchen cupboard, if you have regular traditional processed salt, I think the first thing you should do is taste that against like real salt. And to do that, you want to have like with like, meaning you don't want to use the kosher sized crystal of one and a fine sized crystal of the other, because we just talked about how it dissolve differently on the tongue. So
not really giving them a fair chance.
Right. So the first thing that you would do, and for that salt, especially this very first is salt different tasting, you want to taste the real salt first. So you'd put a little bit of real salt in your hand, and you would just taste it
right now.
And when you taste it, it's going to taste just like salt. It's not going to be, it's just going to taste like salt. And It's just going to taste like salt. And then if you tasted the processed salt, in the other hand, when out of the canister type salt, when you taste that, what you're going to notice, it's going to burn the back of your throat. It's going to be very bitter.
Yeah.
And where typically after you taste, unless you taste a lot of it, but
like
if you were to
like a
taste,
neti pot or something, or if you're using it like to I got salt in my throat. But or like if you're sick or something, and that's why like our moms always tell us, make sure that you drink lots of warm liquids and like gargle salt water, and it burns, and I hate it.
Yeah, but if you like right now, you took a pretty good handful, it looked like, but now your mouth, it shouldn't have a chemical taste to it. Actually, should have a sweetness to it.
It does. It has a pleasant taste.
And you're probably not dying of thirst right now, where you would be if that was the processed white salt. Like if it was processed, you would have a burn in the back of your throat, kind of a chemical burn, and you would be immediately thirsty. Because those coated crystals act very differently than that natural sweet salt flavor. So that's the very first test. Taste the natural salt first, and then taste that processed salt second. Now, if you taste the processed salt first, the problem with that is it's so bitter, it's going to mask the sweet salt of the natural salt first. So that's why you need to taste the natural salt first, because that chemical salt it changes the palate, and it's really hard to taste the sweet savory of the natural real salt if you've tasted that processed salt first.
It'd be like eating. We went to a very nice high-end restaurant a couple years ago for a date night, and they served this this appetizer that had peanut butter in it. We thought that was kind of goofy. I mean, everything else was great. Like, I mean, I had elk. I had an elk steak. I mean, like, it was a very nice high class restaurant, and the appetizer was actually quite delicious. But there was some peanut butter in it, and it just ruined every wine that we tried. Like the entire rest of the night.
And that's what that processed salt would do. It changes. That's why you got to start with the natural. So once you do that, then just throw that away. Use it for Play-Doh with the kids, or use it for ice melt, but don't use it again after you taste it that first time. And then it can get really fun, because I'm a big fan of Redmond. I love Redmond salt. I think it's almost all that I have at my house, but I do have some other fun salts. There's a Bali salt that look like little pyramids that are kind of fun. But once you get past that, and now you're doing,
is that Malden by chance?
It's a brand like Malden.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, because we've kind of gotten into Malden lately too.
And it's pretty, right? And if you
get a nice texture is great, but the flavor just, it doesn't compare with Redmond.
No,
the flavor's okay, but the texture is what you're experiencing on that one.
Yeah. So after that, then you can go down. And again, if you're testing different sizes or types of salt, the closer you can get to the same size particle, the better you're going to be. And typically that's the kosher size. And so if you had the kosher size with the red lid, and the smoked salt that we talked about earlier is about that same size, and you can put just one crystal on your tongue, let it dissolve, and the regular red lid kosher salt's going to have a nice sweet savory flavor. And then you put that same size of crystal in that's the smoked salt, and when that dissolves on your tongue, it's going to be a completely different experience. And the nice thing about the kosher size is, because it's just do one or two crystals. There's going to be a nice little crunch to it, but they dissolve smoother they dissolve smoother and softer than you would if you were to do that with powder, or if you did that with the fine before. It's going to almost be overpowering because it's so much. But one or two crystals of each one. And then, you mentioned the Malden salt. So if you take a crystal out of that kosher jar there, and try to get the same volume, and then taste the one and notice how it dissolves. Then you put the Malden, and it's going to dissolve like a snowflake. It's going to disappear really fast. And so it's nice, but the flavor, it's not strong. It's not going to last long. But if you were to put that on an oyster, for instance, it's going to dissolve really quick, that the Malden will, because it's such a light crystal.
Got to eat it fast.
You got to eat it fast, but it's going to be very different, a very different sensation than if you put that same volume of the smoked salt, which actually would be really good on an oyster.
That'd be bomb.
Because you don't typically smoke oysters.
Right.
But if you put some smoked salt on there, that'd be pretty tasty.
There you go. It's like that's a good carnivore hack. That's a good diet. That's a good cooking hack right there.
And so there's actually there's a few companies. It's not really common, but they do a Cabernet salt. You mentioned wine earlier.
Huh.
And I made this for a while. I didn't mass produce it at all.
But don't tell my wife about that, man. She'll be eating that stuff all day, the entire day. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, it's super expensive if you were to buy it. But what you can do is, get a bottle of wine and dump the whole bottle into a glass mason jar or a Tupperware dish, and then fill it full of kosher salt. And so you've got this kind of this slurry. It's chunky, and then take a scoop of that and spread it out across a cookie sheet, thin cookie sheet, or a casserole pan or something, and put it in under the broiler and just bake it until you bake all of the wine off. And then you're going to have these kind of sticky, clumpy Cabernet flavored salt crystals.
Oh man.
That's pretty good.
I'm so glad this is on recording, because Taylor and I are totally going to do this.
And then you can do it with different types of wine. And so, do it with a nice rich Malbec, and do it with a lighter, Cabernet or something. And anyway, it's kind of fun. And, you can do it with the kids.
I'm texting you pictures when we're doing this, and I'm calling you if I forget or if I feel like I'm doing something wrong. But this I'm amped about this.
And I haven't done it enough to know the exact science of how much, because some of the salt crystals end up dissolving into the wine itself.
Did you do the same thing with beer or whiskey?
Yeah, I've never tried that. I think whiskey would probably work better. Beer has enough water that you'd probably have to use the larger coarse size crystals with something like a beer, because it's going to dissolve a lot of that. With a whiskey, it would even probably work a little better even, or like a bourbon, because the alcohol content is so high, it's not going to dissolve. I would guess very little of the salt would dissolve into the solution. Where, remember I said at the first of the episode that water will hold 26% sodium chloride.
Yeah.
That's fresh water. I don't know what beer would hold, because you've already got, 3 to 4% alcohol. But if you were to put salt with beer, like a nice rich IPA or something, and then bake that, scoop those crystals out and then bake it. It'd be interesting for sure.
Okay, I'm gonna be your guinea pig, and I'm gonna text you a picture of it and show you how it turns out.
Okay, the only thing I've done is I've only tried it with wine. I've never tried it with anything else. But with wine, it was really good. It had a very it was almost like a candyish flavor, because by the time you and there's quite a bit of sugars in wine anyway. And so by the time the salt crystals absorb the flavor, and then you bake off the water and some of the alcohol content, you're left with this. Anyway, and the salt crystals are kind of a purple color. Anyway, I'd love to see your pictures. And if you have some of your audience and some of your clients that experiment with this too, I'd love to. We could have a whole blog post on making, bourbon infused salt crystals. Do it yourself.
The sky's the limit. Yeah, we're thinking sometime like around January or February of doing a meat and salt challenge, to where we all do the same workouts every day, eat the same meats every day, eat the same salts every day. And so by the end of the challenge, we're all fit, we're all healthy, we've eliminated sugar from our diet, and we've all learned a lot about salt. So
I can't keep thinking about that oyster. And I was thinking, man, if you made like a Cabernet salt or like a Pinot Noir or some really Malbec or, really, nice wine salt, and put that on an oyster. I think there can be all kinds of, and then you can feel better about it, because you're not drinking wine. You're actually just eating it with your salt.
I know. And that's kind of the other thing too. I was like, should I say this? Should I not? I was like, all right. So one of the hardest things about this last competition prep has been cutting out alcohol. And so because Robert Sykes is just not a fan of alcohol on a ketogenic diet. And that's, I mean, really all bodybuilders are on this, particularly coaches, because
It's a poison. I mean, it's not great for us, but
yeah, I do notice that if I eat an insane amount, so on my refeeds, basically my calories will be getting close to a show. Right now my calories are around 2,700, and it's all meat, right? All animal products. Like my condiments are raw egg yolks, so my refeeds, I'll eat as much as 300 to 400 grams of protein, typically towards the end of the day, kind of all in one sitting. And the goal is to completely max out my glycogen store, so at the next day I'm just a beast, right? And so then when it comes to show day, I've been dieting for so long, but then I am able to fill out and get that paper thin skin and the veins popping and everything, and it actually makes you look temporarily enhanced compared to how you look throughout the week. Now, when I do consume, when I wake up the next morning, it probably doesn't surprise you that I'm typically bloated, and it takes some walking and some apple cider vinegar and stuff to kind of get it moving around. And if I time it properly, then around prejudging the competition the next day, bam, that's when I look the best that I do the entire week, is at that point in time. But having a glass of wine or some whiskey with the food, I've noticed less bloat the next morning, better night's sleep. And it just, I don't know. I feel like it helps everything digest quite a bit better. So, but yeah, no, you're right. You're right. It is a poison, and especially in large amounts, but it does have a tendency to knock you out of ketosis too, which is why it's not friendly to meat-based low carb diets. But now I'm just thinking, okay, I can continue to not consume alcohol as much as I want, but if we get the salt thing down, man, we'll have Maker's Mark crystals. We'll have the sky's the limit.
Yeah, I think I'm excited to hear what you come up with. Like I said, I had been introduced to some Cabernet salt. I was actually in Japan and at this salt tasting, and they had some. I thought, man, that's actually really interesting. And so I wondered if I could make it myself, and so I made some at home, and it was fun. It was kind of a family affair there. Everybody's like, "What are you doing?" But yeah, I'd love to hear what you come up with.
Okay, so you guys have earth paste. This is a toothpaste product. Why would salt in toothpaste be something that would be a benefit over Crest toothpaste that you just get from the store?
Yeah, so right next to this seabed on my grandfather's farm, there's this outcropping of clay. Clay's been used since the dawn of time. The Romans, the Persians, every civilization that's used salt also used clay. They took it to war with them. Every diva since Cleopatra has put clay on her face at a spa, because when the clay dries, it draws and pulls out impurities. And so as long as we've had the salt, we've had this clay deposit that's just right there in Redmond. And clay is a great base for a toothpaste because it's alkaline, and so it gets rid of the acidity in the mouth that's responsible for acid erosion of the teeth.
Wow.
It's a nice.
I'm sorry. I want to cut you off for 1 second. Could you please just keep in the back of your mind? I suffer with extremely low teeth enamel, and that's from a history of this is something I'm very open with on our podcast, actually, and have been for quite some time, is because I feel a responsibility to share this problem with other people that also struggle with this. But I've battled body dysmorphia and eating disorders, specifically binging and purging, which I'm now paying the consequences for having done that for a very large period of my life. The carnivore diet and eliminating carbs has really been a huge part in getting past that. As well as a coach and a supportive network and a wife that is extremely supportive and understands my problem. But I've been completely sober for quite some time now. And that being said, there's a genetic component to it, and I do like to consume acidic foods, like putting lemon juice in my water. That's pretty much it. Apple cider vinegar, stuff like that. And so my teeth enamel is horrible, and I'm very self-conscious about it. And as a matter of fact, I need to get my teeth just completely redone. I'm looking at this and I'm seeing that there's probably a huge benefit to the enamel layer based on what I'm seeing in your guys' toothpaste ingredients.
Hey everyone, Coach Taylor Milton here. Welcome to Skullbellz TV, the official YouTube channel of supersetyourlife.com, where you're going to discover a weekly upload of quick and easy to follow workout tutorials featuring Coach Colt, myself, or one of our athletes to keep your workouts fun, practical, and effective. Our family's latest keto carnivore recipes that fuel Colt's competitions and keep myself and our kiddos strong and healthy. Video uploads of the supersetyourlife.com podcast, now over 100 episodes, your weekly dose of entertainment, education, and inspiration to fuel your life inside and beyond the gym, and much more. Last thing before we get into the video, we're asking a big favor from you. This has been working beautifully, so if you would please think of someone you care about that would benefit from this video, go ahead and smash that like button, click the share button, and text this video to them. That would mean the world to us. And while you're at it, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss more exciting content from Skullbellz TV, because our team has lots of meat and lots of muscle coming your way, and I promise you won't want to miss it. When you hit the subscribe button, you'll see a bell icon pop up. You want to click that too so you're notified every time we release a new video. Thank you so much for the support. It means the world to us. Every like, share, and subscription helps our channel grow and supports our family's hard work. So thank you so much for doing your part too. That's all we ask. God bless you, and please enjoy this video.
Yeah, so enamel is primarily calcium phosphate. There's the primary building blocks of enamel. And throughout the day, anytime we eat sugar, these bacteria that we have in our mouth called Staphylococcus mutans, these bacteria, they digest sugar or carbs in our mouth, and they excrete lactic acid. So, our teeth, you could take your teeth and put them in a jar of sugar water and it'd be just fine. It's not the sugar that hurts your teeth, it's the acid that pulls out the calcium phosphate from the teeth. And whether that's from the bacteria in our mouth, or whether it's because we're sucking on lemons, or because of stomach acid, all of those things erode our enamel away.
And apple cider vinegar too just destroys them.
Yeah, and so anything that's alkaline, as far as an oral product goes, gets rid of that acidity in the mouth. So let's say you suck on a lemon, immediately your teeth or your enamel will start to dissolve. And so if you were to then rinse your mouth with baking soda or rinse your mouth with an alkaline clay, that immediately stops the acid erosion from taking place.
Wow.
Because you've brought the pH back up. Your enamel, a healthy enamel, can withstand acid at 5.5. So typically, like you and I right now, our mouths are probably close to 7. Our bodies like to be 7. And so our bodies will use minerals from our saliva. It'll use minerals from our bodies to keep the mouth pretty close to 7. And same thing with your blood. Your blood has to be close to 7. If it's not, you're going to have some problems. And so your body will use minerals out of bones, out of fluids, to maintain that balance of our blood. And same thing with your saliva. So if our saliva or our mouth acidity drops below 5.5 because of anything, whether we sucked on a lemon, we drank some coffee, we ate some sugar, and now the bacteria are excreting lactic acid into our mouth, anytime our saliva is below 5.5, we're going to start losing enamel. And so the reason that this particular clay is great as a base for toothpaste is it has a pH of about 9.8. And so, you have some breakfast, you drink some coffee or whatever, all of a sudden your mouth starts to literally dissolve the teeth out of your head. You brush your teeth with an alkaline product. It could be a baking soda toothpaste, or it could be something like earth paste, and boom, the alkalinity is right back up. So that's the first thing, is the base is actually clay. That's the more magical part of earth paste. And salt, though, is great for gum disease. If you ever had a tooth extracted, you go in for dental work, and the dentist will tell you, or your mom will tell you, hey, gargle with some salt water. It's great for a sore throat. It's also great for a tooth extraction. If you have your wisdom teeth taken out, you've got a dry socket there. By rinsing with salt water, it helps clean and heal. The old saying, put salt in a wound. It wasn't to be a jerk. It was actually salt dumped in a wound was actually one of the best things you could do if you didn't have, Western medicine, because salt would cauterize the wound. It would keep all the bacteria out, and salt helps it heal faster. And so adding a little bit of salt to the clay-based toothpaste couple drops of essential oil, and that's what earth paste is. And we have some
Wow.
that's
Yeah, because I'm noticing that on every single one of your flavors. Some of your flavors are cracking me up. Like, oh man, like I didn't know that you could do so many flavors of toothpaste. Like, this is really cool. But
so
the second ingredient on every single one is this bentonite clay.
yep. So
Oh,
water is
and silver.
yes, we put a little bit of colloidal silver. Great for gum disease, great for bad breath.
Oh, there's so many amazing health benefits to silver. I use it I use it as a topical. I use it for just about everything.
I do too. I think it's an amazing ingredient, and it's not going to turn your body blue. It's not going to turn your mouth blue. It's not. I mean, people kind of get crazy things in their head about silver, and it's a really trace amount in there, but it helps with bad breath and gum disease. And
Cool.
the other ingredient you'll see on there is xylitol. Now, xylitol is a sugar. It's a 5-carbon sugar. It's a sugar alcohol.
Mhm.
We do have a flavor that is unsweetened. That there's no xylitol in it. But the reason xylitol is in there is so the bacteria in our mouth, these Staphylococcus mutans, they eat sugar and they excrete lactic acid. Well, xylitol looks like sugar, it tastes like sugar, but these bacteria can't digest it. And so the reason you'll see tooth products with xylitol or gum, you have xylitol gum, there's xylitol nasal rinses, it's because these bacteria can't digest this 5-carbon sugar, and so they die trying. And so there's a lot of dental studies that show that an oral product with xylitol works against these bacteria colonies that end up forming, it's called a biofilm, which becomes tartar and anyway, it becomes the tartar buildup on your teeth is because of these bacterial colonies, and these bacterial colonies, they can't function as well in the presence of xylitol. And so that's why that's in there. And I mean, you actually could eat earth paste. It's clean enough to eat. It's all earth-based stuff. Of course, if you're brushing and spitting it out, you're not going to get the artificial, the xylitol concern, because you're rinsing and spitting.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Wow. My mind is absolutely blown. I think I understand toothpaste better than I ever have in my entire life. That was really fascinating. Thank you for that. Okay. So we've learned how good salt is from you. How good mineral salt is for you, sea salt, from a dietary perspective. We've learned some other fun things that salt can be used for that is not necessarily dietary related. That brings me to a third topic, a very controversial one, is because I've been wanting to get into this, but haven't really been able. I'm just not 100% sold on the science behind it. Epsom salt baths. A lot of people swear by them and say that there's actual healing processes, that there's actual healing benefits to the fact that there's salt in the bath. And then there's, I think, the overwhelming majority that would say you just like the way that the salt feels and it's a placebo, but hey, if that's what you like, then more power to you. I am all about active recovery, right? I mean, I push myself to the absolute limit to where my body is basically like in pain all day, every day. And I just, if I don't feel like that, I'm like, man, there's somebody else that's working harder than me, and he's going to get that trophy instead of me, right? That's just kind of how my brain has been my entire life, and sometimes there's consequences to that. So that being said, my active recovery consists daily of not all these things, but as often as I can, things like massage therapy, sauna. I do an ice bath pretty much every single day, and so I'm like, great, should I start throwing salt in there? Making love to my wife, so like stuff like that. Like I get a better night's sleep, but salt baths is that a real thing? Is that legit?
So the history of salt baths go back a really long time, and native cultures, ancient cultures, they would make trips to healing mineral pools, and or they would make trips to the ocean and bathe in salt. And if you think about the time in your life when your body's growing the fastest, your cells are the healthiest, it's when you're in the womb before you're born and you're floating in a body of salt water. And so the idea of a salt bath goes back a long time, and a lot of cultures have used this idea of salt baths. Now, I do think there is something to hot mineral bath therapy. But if you look at the science behind our skin, our skin, I mean, you can have things that are transdermal, meaning, you can put a patch on, a nicotine patch, for instance. If somebody were trying to quit smoking, you can put that nicotine patch on and you can absorb stuff through that patch.
Like topical magnesium supplements. That's really popular.
Yeah, and there is a certain amount that you can absorb transdermal, but it's not like consumption. Meaning, if you were to take a bath in beer, you're not going to get drunk. The skin doesn't work that way.
Don't give me more ideas, man. Let's keep the alcohol out of this.
So
I'll be one guy that's for sure unashamedly drinking bathwater if that's the case.
Yeah. So, growing up, I was a wrestler in high school. And so I wrestled, did really well. And after a long weekend of wrestling matches, a hot salt bath, it felt really good. And as I was trying to suck weight the night before a match, I would take a salt bath. And to me, it felt like in a salt bath, I would sweat faster in a salt bath than I would in a normal bath. Now, that's completely anecdotal. But that was part of my routine to suck weight, was to take a hot salt bath to sweat out as much as I could before weigh-ins. Now,
and maybe the salt just relaxed you, and you were able to shed some water weight because of that.
And I personally think that's it.
Yeah.
Now, magnesium. So Epsom salt is magnesium sulfate, and it's a processed version of salt. It feels really good. It makes the water smooth and soft and slick, and so it makes your skin feel nice. But are you absorbing the magnesium sulfate through your skin? Most studies would say no, you're not. If you take a salt bath, they've tested people. Hey, they're bathing in this salt. They test it, and there's not an uptake of the salt or the salt bath, because otherwise the skin doesn't work that way. You'd get into, if that was the case, you'd get in a salt bath that's super salty, and you would end up like a shriveled prune, because the salt water would suck out the water just like it does out of a piece of steak.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to cut your skin open and do that, it's going to suck the water out of your muscle tissue, but the skin doesn't work that way. Now, for me, I love a hot salt bath. I do find myself super relaxed. I personally think it's more to do with temperature therapy and deprivation therapy. If I'm in a hot salt bath, I'm not on my phone. It's one of the few times that I'm not on my phone is when I'm sitting in hot salt water. And
when I take ice baths, I'm always on my phone. That's how I get my mind off the fact that I'm in a freaking ice bath.
Well, I wouldn't do it with salt, because even though a lot of our electronics today, you could probably drop your cell phone in your ice bath, and you as long as you got it out pretty quick, cell phone technology is pretty good today.
That once.
I would not do that with salt water, because salt is an activator. It's an electrolyte booster. And so dropping your phone in a body of salt water, seawater, not as ideal, but if you drop it in, a hot salt bath, yeah, it's not going to turn out as well as if it was an ice bath.
Yep, there goes my livelihood.
Yeah. Okay, so I personally, and I could be wrong. I'm open to the idea of I could be wrong. And when I take a salt bath, I like the smell of lavender. Mm-hmm. And so I'll take lavender essential oil, and I'll drop, if you put essential oil, maybe you like eucalyptus or whatever flavor you like, but if you put essential oil into your hot water, the oil is going to sit on top of the water. It's not going to really, oil and water don't mix, right?
Right.
But if you take, let's say you're going to put a cup of, or even 2 cups of real salt in the bath with you, and if you take the couple drops of essential oil that you like the smell of, add it to the salt first, and then add the salt to the water, then it actually diffuses it more than if you were to put a drop on the top of the surface of the water.
Okay.
And I don't think there's any magic in putting a little lavender and eucalyptus in the water, other than I think it smells good and I think it's relaxing, which I think is, even if it's placebo, it's good for me. And so,
like when the Russian guys bring the eucalyptus oil into the sauna at the gym, and it's like,
yeah, I mean, I like it.
It smells good.
And even just the joy of life, I think, is worth doing it.
Yeah.
But I don't think and I could be wrong, but I don't think there's a lot of magic to an Epsom salt bath other than it makes your skin feel nice. And so whether you do Epsom salt or you dump in Celtic or you dump in Redmond, some essential oil, a hot salt bath, I think increases circulation. I think it's good for the body. I think ice and hot both have their place. So I think salt baths are great, and hey, knock yourself out. But I don't think the research I've read, I think the jury's still out, and I'm guessing
That's what I came up with too.
yeah. I think heat therapy and deprivation therapy and relaxation, man, I think there is a place for all of that. And if salt helps you do that, great. But yeah, I haven't seen anything that would say that there's some scientific magic happening out that the salt's doing that you wouldn't get with just a nice, relaxing hot bath of good, clean water. I could be wrong, but that's Darryl as of today.
Wonderful. Well, cool. I think we've covered quite a bit more salt related topics than most of our listeners are used to hearing. But this has been mind blowing. This has been everything that I thought it would be. Like I said, like last night, I was just like, I got to get to bed early because I got to get my sleep. I got to make sure that I can actually sleep, because I can't believe I'm going to have the opportunity to talk to Darryl. So thank you again for your time. This has been absolutely this has been a life-changing conversation. It really, really has. So
as for me too, Colt, I am just delighted that you'd had me on. I kind of started with a teaser saying there's 3 questions that I think would be great if you're looking for a great salt.
Okay.
I think if you ask these 3 questions, you're going to find a great product, and it might be Selena's Celtic product. It might be, Redmond here in Utah. It might be whatever, but, and if you're looking for a new mountain bike or gym equipment, or maybe a bourbon, whatever you're looking for, I think these are 3 great questions. So the first question is who's producing it? Today there's so many products that get either commingled or shipped, and to be able to know exactly who is producing the product, I think is a great start. And whether that's going down to the farmer's market and talking to the farmer who raised the elk, or harvested the salmon, or whatever it is, I think know who's producing it. Be able to talk to Selena, talk to Joe who raised the elk, or whatever. Yep. I think it's really important. That's the first one.
Yep.
The second is know where it's from. And I think today, if you know who's producing it, you can know the source or where it's from. And you can talk to Selena and say, hey, tell me a little bit about these ponds, whether it's the Hawaiian source that she has, or it's the Brittany, France source. Where is this product coming from? So know who's producing it, know the source. And the third question is, what are they doing to it? Are they putting anything in? Are they taking anything out? And it might be helpful they're putting it in. It might be good they're taking it out. But I think if you know who's producing it, the source, where it's from, and what they're doing to it, are they putting anything and taking anything out? I think if you know the answer to those 3 questions, you're going to find a great product. And I think we vote for the world we want to live in with the products that we buy. And I think by asking those 3 questions, we're gonna live a little more intentionally.
Yeah,
and I think
you're voting with your spending dollar. Who do you want to succeed in business?
Yeah, and I think you'd find somebody great like Selena, who has a great salt company. You might find Redmond here and would love to be your salt supplier. You might find a great source of salmon, or a great source of eggs, or whatever protein or meat that you're sourcing. I think anyway, I just think if we all, and I don't do this all the time, I'd like to think I do, but I think if we all lived a little more intentionally, the world would be just a better place, whether you're buying a mountain bike, or you're buying salt, or you're buying steak for dinner.
I 100% agree with you. Yeah. There's a local Christian store that it's so easy to just buy something on, I'm not going to say the name of the company, but but it'll literally be here the next day and it's cheaper. Or we can drive down the road and go to this place and support this little local business because we just love the people there, and we just love the fact that they're in business. And is it worth it on paper? No, but there's
more than just paper.
Totally. Thank you for saying that. That's what I was trying to say. Wonderful. Where can people go to find more about you and your content? Not Relight, great. Redmond, great. But Darryl, where can people find Darryl's content?
Yeah, come mountain biking with me sometime. I don't have a podcast. I have a podcast in mind, and every time I talk to somebody like you, I think, man, I want to be like you and start a podcast. And
we should do it together, man. Let's do it.
I've got this idea, but
make it happen.
One of these days, maybe I'll reach out and pick your brain about how to do what you do.
Oh, I'd be honored. Yeah. All right. Well, and for our listeners too, just for the record, if you just search this gentleman's name, Darryl, Darryl, Bosshardt, that's a boss name, Bosshardt, just search him on YouTube, and you'll find a ton of content. And so if you're looking for something that's like an hour-long interview, I mean, you just finished listening to one. But there's lots of other people that have interviewed him, so you can find his content pretty much anywhere if you just search for his name. So and yeah, I just want to say again, thank you for the bottom of my heart for your time. This is going to be really, really helpful for our clients and for me. We're really bodybuilding in general can be taken to such an extreme that I really think that what this sport needs and the direction that it really is headed in a lot of ways is towards health, right? That's how bodybuilding started. I think that's what it should be about. I think that we should be healthier because we're involved in the sport, not because we it shouldn't be something that takes over your life. It should be something that supersets your life. It makes you better at everything else that you do in life. So thanks for being a huge part of that, Darryl. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on. It's been fun.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us on part 2 of this interview with Mr. Bosshardt. If you found this helpful or entertaining, all we ask is that you share this episode with a friend. That would be awesome. It's how we've been growing our content organically on this channel, and it's been a blessing in a big way. So we just want to really give our heartfelt appreciation to everybody that has been sharing and subscribing to the channel. And we'd also love to hear what you think of the show. So any ratings or reviews that you have are very, very much appreciated as well. We do have a new episode typically every Saturday morning, but if we don't make that, we try to still get an average of about one a week out. And then, so that's what you can expect for future episodes on salt, on bodybuilding, on meat, on Jesus. You never know really what we're going to talk about here, but it's all good stuff. I promise that. Okay. So yeah, typically a new episode every Saturday morning. Please subscribe so you don't miss those. Oh, and 2 more things before we wrap up. I'm so sorry I forgot to mention these. First, very, very important announcement that you're going to want to keep in the back of your mind is that episode 105, the next episode, is going to feature Tanji Johnson, IFBB, NPC, pro bodybuilder, and judge. We had a wonderful question and answer session, talked a lot about posing, mindset, and it was a really incredible conversation. So you're not gonna want to miss that one. After these competitions this weekend, when we get back, we will publish that episode, and so you can expect that one probably around 7 or 10 days of the publication of this episode. So episode 105, you will not want to miss that. That was a life-changing conversation. And then the very last thing is, I forgot to add this to this show, but typically we like to wrap up with a customer review. It's something that leaves me feeling encouraged and other people that are encouraged in the middle of their fitness journeys too. So this one is from Kevin Cash. He lives right down the road actually, because he is one of our clients. And so he's only been working with us for a couple weeks now, but we're already like brothers. It's just been really great getting to know this guy, and set a first competition date for him already. And so kind of working backwards and working on some muscularity points right now, a little bit of conditioning at the same time, because you can build muscle and burn fat at the same time. It's not impossible. And so that's exactly what he's doing right now. He's going to share a couple of his results based on a check-in that we had over video chat. So I just took the audio from that. And yeah, ladies and gentlemen, this is Kevin Cash. And then for coaching inquiries, you can text the word coaching to 206-743-1346. Coach Taylor and Coach Colt, that is myself, yours truly. We are currently accepting new clients. We have 2 more spaces to fill before the year of 2023. So if that is something that you would like to talk more about, great. Let's have a free consultation. You can text coaching to 206-743-1346, and I will put a link to that scheduling calendar in the show notes as well, if you would rather schedule it that way. Other than that, thank you so much, everybody. God bless again, and here's Kevin.
Hey man, just want to let you know I'm down about 1.5% body fat over the last 2 weeks or so. My midsection's a lot flatter. I'm starting to see a little bit more definition. Feeling stronger in the gym and overall pretty happy. So thanks.